It's now my pleasure to introduce County Executive George Latimer. Mr. Latimer took office as the 9th County Executive of Westchester in January of 2018. And George is a true son of Westchester. He's a third-generation Westchester native, growing up in the city of Mount Vernon. After attending Mount Vernon Public Schools, George graduated with a BA from Fordham University in the Bronx, as well as a master's degree in public administration from New York University's Wagner School. After completing his education, Mr. Latimer served as a marketing executive, which has afforded him firsthand business and economic experience for over 20 years at major corporate subsidiaries of Nestle and ITT. George has a long and distinguished career in public service, beginning with his tenure in the Rye City Council. As most of you know, George has spent years as a county legislator, including serving as the chair of the board. Since 2004, George has served at the state level, first as a state assembly member, and was elected to the state senate in November of 2012. He's never lost an election. Says a lot. Says a lot about him. George has graciously agreed to answer questions after his prepared remarks, which is consistent with his accessibility and inclusion that has marked his entire political career. But before we hear from the county executive, I'd like us to view a short video recapping the successes of his administration in the past year. So if we could cue the video.
On New Year's Day, George Latimer was sworn in as Westchester County Executive by State Supreme Court Judge Gretchen Walsh. The swearing-in took place in his new office on the 9th floor of the county's McCallion office building in White Plains.
Day 2 in office, and a new Westchester County executive is banning a long-time and controversial tradition, the Westchester County Gun Show.
Hundreds of teachers at Westchester Community College have reason to be hopeful tonight. That's because the county's new leadership fast-tracking that process.
We're here to talk about a very significant action that Westchester County has taken today, and it deals with the epidemic that we're all experiencing in the opioid crisis. This is the first time in a number of years that we will be in the Board of Legislative's chamber for our announcement.
The Honorable George Latimer, Westchester County Executive.
Con Edison estimates 30,000 customers across the county do not have power tonight.
We're all tired of these excuses. There are human beings out there. We're giving statistics instead of real-world services.
Well, women on average make about 80 cents to every dollar a man makes. Westchester County lawmakers are taking up a bill that could level the playing field.
It survived the Revolutionary War, but the ravages of time have taken a toll.
We've all come together to preserve, protect, and advance the Miller House for the years to come. Today we are, though, here to talk about the playland arrangements that were made with Standard Amusement.
Latimer Shared Services Plan, they say, could save the county some $27 million in recurring savings. It was the final chance tonight for Westchester residents to weigh in on the future of the county airport.
We wanted to make sure that the dialogue was much more open than it has been in the past.
The boardwalk in Westchester County today opening, finally, much to the joy of so many.
I've just signed the Green Westchester Pledge. We're here to introduce you to the new fleet of vehicles that will be on the streets of Westchester. You read 15 to 20 minutes a day, you're going to get a free pass to Playland on opening day.
More than 100 people who called Westchester home and died on 9/11 are remembered here at the Rising in Valhalla.
This is a day of unity where we all stand side by side.
Well, thousands of people in Westchester don't get paid if they miss a day of work because they're sick, but things look like that's about to change.
This is the first time the county government has had a budget forum prior to the preparation of the county budget.
Westchester's newest law bans health professionals from using gay conversion therapy on minors.
I really think this is a great, great moment for the veterans and every one of us who have been in uniform and are still in uniform.
Thank you. We have a budget on time and balanced.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our County Executive, George Latimer.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Bill. It's an honor to be here with all of you today. A year ago when I was here, I spoke in aspirational terms about what we hoped to accomplish during the course of the administration. We have 1 year under our belt, things that have happened, things that haven't happened yet, things that I wish didn't happen, but we go through the process of learning as we go. Before I start, a brief review of what we think happened last year that's of some interest, I just want to reintroduce some people who were introduced already. We have, at our level of government, an executive branch and a legislative branch. I'm a product of that legislative branch for a long period of time, and I had the privilege to chair it, as did Ken Jenkins, who's deputy county executive. But I've watched in Washington and some degree in Albany the natural disagreement that comes between legislators and executives. And we're seeing an extreme example where everything stops because there can't be discussion and there can't be compromise. At our level of government, as the executive of the county, I respect the legislative branch. I want Ben Boykin and his colleagues to stand up and stay standing, and I'd like you to join me with an applause for the work that these people, Catherine Parker, Mike Kaplowitz, Margaret Kunzio, anybody else that I haven't seen. This is what makes us a democracy, the check and the balance between the executive and the legislative branch. Please stand up, Ben and his team. I also want to ask all of those who are working in the executive administration to please stand up all at the same time. I want you to get a look at all of these people and see them. They have joined the team that we put together. Bridget, please stand up. Tom, Natasha, Ken and Joan, everybody, please stand up. Any of the commissioners who might be in the room, any other executives, John Nona. I want to highlight three of the first appointments that I had the privilege of making as a county executive. I learned a long time ago in my business career, long before I was elected to an office, that if you're going to be successful, you must have capable people around you. You must hire people because of their ability, and you better listen to their advice. And you have back and forth debate and discussion, but you can't ignore wisdom when it's offered to you. An election, as I happen to be Roman Catholic, or if you're Christian, Election Day is not Pentecost Sunday. If you know what Pentecost Sunday is, the Spirit comes down and rests upon the disciples, lets them speak in all languages, and they know everything. Election night is not that. It's the beginning of a process, not the culmination of a process. I had the opportunity to run for this position and compete for my party's nomination against a very talented man, a man who, like myself, at a different time, chaired the County Board of Legislators. And it's not easy to compete in politics. And it's even harder still to compete and still retain affection and respect for the person you're competing against. In that process, Ken Jenkins and I competed, and that portion of the campaign 2 years ago now was longer than the general election. But during that period of time, I think together we wrote a book about how you can compete and not be vicious and nasty. And with his talent, I was honored that he agreed to be my deputy county executive. Ken, please stand up. When we looked for a person to serve as director of operations, I knew that whatever talents Ken and I had, they were generalist talents. And you needed to have people who specifically understood how to manage and implement policy throughout an organization. And the county government is a complicated organization. It's almost 5,000 employees. We treat sewerage, and we incarcerate prisoners, and we provide health clinic services and DSS and it's all over the ballpark. And to find a person who's got that type of varied experience on a day-to-day basis is hard to find. We found that person right here on the board of WCA. She has served in so many different capacities, in so many different ways, and in two separate states, in Connecticut and in New York. She was a state commissioner of an important department. Here in New York State as Director of Transportation, in Connecticut as Director of Economic Development. I asked, and she could have easily said, no thanks. I don't need it. And she doesn't need it. But she agreed to come on board as Director of Operations. I couldn't be happier to have Joan McDonald on this team. Joan, please stand. And again, you have to know what you don't know. That's really the beginning of wisdom. I am by profession a sales and marketing person. And when you deal in government, many things come back to the practice and the understanding of law. And I've worked over the years with many terrific lawyers in my various capacities. When I was chair of the board, Judge Alan Shankman was the county attorney, ably assisted by Sue Gary, who's in the room today, and others who could give legal advice during my tenure as chair of the board. As Ben knows, as Mike Kaplowitz knows, as Ken knows, you can't make decisions oblivious to what is legally possible. And sometimes I think, again, we executives think about what we want. We don't think about possibly what's doable. I asked an outstanding lawyer who happens to be a friend, who happens to have served in the county legislature, happens to have been mayor of a village, but more than that, an outstanding litigator in the private sector, a partner with Dewey and LaBeouf, and then when that partnership evolved, a partner at, I never get the in sequence right, Patton Squires Boggs or Patton Boggs Squires, whichever was, all three big important partners. And he too was a partner in the law firm. And I had a chance to talk with him and meet him in his law firm in Rockefeller Center. And you can't help but be impressed when you go into those law firms. Same thing happens when I go to see Bill Harrington and his law firm. You know, you sit there like, man, I don't know anything. These guys know everything. But to have as county attorney somebody that you know understands the law, but also understands the flexibility that's necessary in negotiations is critical. I could not have been happier when John Nona agreed to be county attorney. And John, we owe you a debt of gratitude this county does. Please stand up. Now, before I get into the slide presentation, I just want to give you a little window of yesterday. Yesterday was the tale of two cities for me. The one city that we all focused on, a number of us were there for a wonderful moment, was in Albany, where the state legislature opened its session, the assembly organized, the Senate organized. I spent 8 years in the assembly. I spent 5 years in the Senate. Thomas Wolfe is wrong. You can go home again, and you can see your friends, and you can see the moment that you have where you haven't yet gotten into the heavy-duty issues that are ahead, but you just sort of reconnect on the personal level with all those people. Andy Raffay, who's here, and others that travel in that Albany world back and forth. The nature of the relationships are important. The substance will follow whether or not you have those relationships and those commitments. But, and we saw the great success of our friend and neighbor, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who now heads the New York State Senate. It's an amazing thing to see. And it's obviously amazing because Andrea has had to climb mountains as the first woman and as an African American, but also she's a Westchester person. And I must tell you, to have a person from our county in that position who understands that blend of urban and suburban, and a little bit of rural too, is unique. Because in most cases, you'd wind up with somebody from New York City who may not understand all those nuances. So we're very fortunate to have her in that position. But there was a second half of my tale of two cities. And a couple of people in this room will remember it, because about 8:15 last night, I walked into the elementary school cafeteria at St. Barnabas off of McLean Avenue. I think technically I was in the Bronx. And in that meeting, council members Mike Breen and John Rubo were there. John, Mike, if you're in the room, just stand up. Let everybody know that you're on the Yonkers City Council. And we sat for I was there for about 45 minutes. They were there a little longer than me while we listened to issues about a development on Bronx River Road in Yonkers and what it would do to parking and how would we address it. And David Tubiolo was there. And that's the face of governance. The celebratory moment that we had in Albany, the great high arched ceiling of the Senate and the Assembly, the wonderful emotion of the moment, that's government as we look at it from a symbolic standpoint. But last night in that cafeteria, sitting on those chairs, watching a board, listening to somebody explain how cars are going to make left turns and right turns, and watching John and Mike and David deal with how does this affect their community, that's government too. And to sit in both of those two rooms over the course of yesterday is what this year has been like for me. It's been a part of it has been symbolic. You saw some of it on the video. You know, I look at the video and, you know, it has sort of a flattering ambiance to it. But I got to tell you, I am still that Irish-Italian kid from the south side of Mount Vernon. That will never leave me. I will always be Stan and Loretta's son. Loretta, the factory worker, Stan, the maintenance man. And the accolades and the nice things that come with the position are not as important as sitting in that room in St. Barnabas and seeing if we can figure out how to solve that problem, if that's possible, Because that's why we're in office. We're not in office for the moments of glory and grand appreciation. We're in this for the moments of solving problems that people actually have, as they have on Bronx River Road, trying to get on and off that area. So as we look at this year's county government, I'd like to think what we tried to do in the beginning of process, we certainly haven't completed our work by any means, is working across the aisle, working between the legislative, the executive branches, working with the people who professionally provide resources for us, is to figure out how to solve problems. Some more complex than others, some may seem unsolvable, some could be done fairly easily, but in each case to try to deal with them step by step. The button should be working. Let's see if it does. So first, let's talk about the budget, which is pretty much where everything begins. If you don't allocate resources behind whatever you say, then you're really flying blind. It's more rhetoric than it is reality. This year's county budget is a $1.94 billion budget. That's an increase in spending over last year, over the 2018 budget. The single biggest reason for the increase is implementation of a state program called Raise the Age, which is a different way to handle 16 and 17-year-old young people who have committed serious crimes, and rather than incarcerate them with 18-year-old adults all the way up the line, the state made the decision, I was a member of the legislature to do that we would join 48 other states and have a separate incarceration program and hopefully a plan to help those young people avoid a life of crime, which most think will happen if they go into the criminal justice system, into the prisons, and stay there for an extended period of time. So in implementing that program, we estimated an additional, in round numbers, $40 million worth of spending. That plus debt service, plus solving our wage contracts were the difference in the total spending of the county this year over last year. There is a true cost of running county government. We're going to address that a little bit as I talk today. I know I got to keep this about 20 minutes, and there's a lot of depth and substance. And the people in this room deserve to hear substance. You hear a lot of symbolism. It happens on the campaign trail, a lot of generalities. There really needs to be an understanding of what is the guts of how these things operate. All of you who are successful in your respective careers in medicine, in healthcare, in law, in education, whatever it is, you didn't become successful by just glazing over the top of your area of expertise. You understood the mathematics and the implications of policy making, and that's what we have to do when we look at county government. It's not just what's my tax rate and then close the book. However, there are services that the residents of Westchester expect and deserve, and many of them are mandated by state and federal government. And whether that word mandate kind of glosses over somebody's mind and they don't really understand, oh, it's all government together, we are, as a corporate entity, tasked by the state government with doing certain things that we cannot deconstruct. So to the extent that we can work around the edges and the margins of government, we still must provide certain services, and it's a significant percentage of that $1.9 billion. And as we do those things, we do them not only because there are mandated costs that are mandated by government, but also costs for services that, while not mandated, are absolutely necessary. Those services include things like our Beeline bus system, not mandated by government, but an absolute necessity for those people that don't have cars and need public transit in this county. And sometimes when you see a Beeline bus, it's empty and it's riding down, some road in Dobbs Ferry or Larchmont, and you wonder, why do we have this system? Come with me to Petrillo Plaza in downtown Mount Vernon, or across from the county office building, 148 Martine Avenue, and watch how many people get on a bus to go to work, to go home, to go to school, to go shopping. And you realize that while not a government-mandated service, it's an essential service if we want to have the economics in this county that we have. So, in the 2019 budget, what were some of the component pieces that we felt that we had to deal with? We dealt with putting a hiring freeze in effect. We dealt with renegotiation of key contracts. Probably the single most important thing that we did was to make sure that all of our union contracts were signed, negotiated, delivered, so that we had not only for 2019, but for 2020 and 2021, as much as we could, predictable costs in labor. We all know that labor costs are significant, if not the most significant portion of any budget in any business or entity. And we had a number of union contracts that were unresolved, and some that we inherited on day one were signed and negotiated, but not financed in the 2019 budget. So we had the responsibility to do that, and that was not cheap, but we did that and tried to resolve that within this. What we also did is we renegotiated some existing contracts that were in place. We have had a long-term relationship with Liberty Lines. They have done a tremendous job in a public-private partnership to provide the buses and the services for the Beeline bus system. It could not occur without Liberty Lines. The county needs a partner like that. To do that, however, we extended a contract that began as of January of this year for a 5-year period of time, and in so doing, and I credit John Nona and Joan McDonald working through with Bonaccia and Murphy families to come up with a contract that worked for Liberty Lines and saved the taxpayers of Westchester County over 5 years $20 million. Now, that contract could have been extended automatically. Members of the Board of Legislators advised us on day one, don't do that. Look at the contract, put some energy and effort into it, and you probably can come up with a better deal, and that's exactly what was done. I don't take personal credit for that. That was why you have a Joan McDonald. That's why you have a John Nona, because people who understand how to do these things were able to negotiate a contract, and we signed it, and we were good. We have a new RFP coming out for our health care at the corrections institution. In the extension of 1-year option that we had, we were able to save somewhere between $600,000 to $800,000 in costs for the year for health care at the correction institution. By putting it out to an RFP, we'll see what kind of bids we have out there. You know, I'd always love to see the medical center be the successful bidder, but it has to come out mathematically that it works that way. But, and we are obliged to provide health care for people who are incarcerated. Somebody who, you know, thinks that you throw people in a jail and lock the key and walk away from them may not like that idea, but that is what our responsibilities are. But by looking at RFP renegotiating, we're hoping to find some savings in that and go forward. One of the areas where we've saved some significant money is in risk assessment. Again, I'm out of my depth. I don't purport to know everything about everything. But I do understand that the professionals who've looked at this were able to come up with strategies that enabled us to cover the risk that we have and at the same time do it at a less expensive process. We were able in this budget to begin the process of implementing a shared service initiative. This is very important to the governor, and they have put money behind compensating counties and localities where they can find opportunities for shared services. And it's not like shared services began with this budget or this proposal. It's happening in different places all over. You have in Larchmont and Mamaroneck, in Ossining Village and Ossining Town, between a host of different neighboring communities, existing shared services arrangements. Westchester County has an arrangement with Mount Kisco to provide local police services, normal police services through the county police. And we provide some services to the village of Tuckahoe in police. We're right now engaged with dialogue with the village of Buchanan, which in light of what will happen with Indian Point's closure, Buchanan is going to be one of the most impacted governments in the county by far. And we're engaged with them to see, can we find a place for shared services that would be helpful to the citizens and the government of Buchanan. But in each of these cases, we put a plan together that showed some short-term and some longer-term robust savings, which we intend to implement as we go forward. The closure of the CSEA contract was perhaps the single most important contract that we closed this year. The CSA workforce is 3,200 employees, and I'm giving you round numbers, within Westchester County. That is by far and away well over half, 60% of our workforce. For 7 years, they were without a contract, and we needed to jumpstart the negotiations. And negotiations are never easy. And regardless of how difficult it was, it took us about 8 months before we got to the table with a final. We were talking on day one, but it took us 8 months of back and forth till we could get close to an arrangement. When we had the arrangement that the bargaining unit for CSEA could agree to, and it won to a vote of their union, it was not a wide vote. It was a close vote. And we asked and got concessions that we needed to have, and we made concessions that we thought we could afford to do. 7 years contract closure. They agreed to 2 years of zero. They also agreed to make sure for the first time that every one of their employees contributed to their health care plan. And that was an important concession to make. And we appreciate that type of foresightful activity, and we think we were able to negotiate that because we helped them understand not only what was important to their members, but what was important, and not to the county government, but to the people of Westchester County, what we could afford to do. And we were able to close that contract, and we're very proud we were able to do that. We've conducted a county space assessment of all of our owned and leased spaces, and now we will start to talk about how we consolidate some of those. And we have to make those decisions carefully because some of the places that we lease space in, we've done so to try to help economic development in those municipalities where those leases are. At the same time, we owe it to the taxpayers to try to reduce the amount of money we're paying. And if we own space and we can bring space back into space that we already own and reduce what we lease, then that is a savings to the taxpayers, and that was built into this. And then there's been a streamlining of the capital projects program to try to jumpstart it, get as many of these necessary capital projects through. The projects are necessary, the roads we have to fix, the bridges we have to fix, the infrastructure that's not all that visible, but essential in the running of all of the different real estate holdings that the county has. And then also because those are projects that involve jobs, that businesses that conduct those operations, those capital operations, and the people who are employed by there are all important. You can see I could use Vanna White here. So we mentioned some of the issues that we have going forward beyond the budget. I should point out the most important thing, the only thing people ever seem to want to know. We were able to deliver this county budget at a 2% property tax increase. That is within the tax caps, actually under the tax cap. And let's be candid. I'm a Democrat. Most people expect Democrats to raise taxes. That's the rhetoric, and raise taxes by a lot. I went through a campaign where that's what I pretty much heard all the time. I was going to raise taxes 10%, 8%, all kinds of numbers. I think my friend Mike Kaplowitz said it very accurately, that whatever we do, it ought to be low and slow. And because I am a Democrat, but I also spent 20 years in corporate America, I knew that we weren't going to be able to plausibly raise property taxes beyond the tax cap, the perceived tax cap of 2%. The formula gives you more. That's not what people think. We have to be able to operate under what expectations are. So to deliver a budget balanced at 2% took a lot of effort. And it involves certain things that I would have preferred not to do. We have been scored by the bond rating agencies for fiscal practices, one-shots, going into our fund balance deeper than necessary, well, not deeper than necessary, but to a level at which it is a dangerous low amount to have on board, and an unwillingness to raise revenue when necessary to meet obligations. It makes the people who hold the bonds say, you know what, they need to pay a higher price of interest in order for us to buy their bonds. And so the traditional AAA bond rating for the county over the course of the last year was dropped to AA1. AA plus, whatever the separate rating agencies were. But they were looking at practices, not of what we did during the year, but over an extended period of time. So over an extended period of time, we got to this point with the decisions we made, and we were desirous, prior administration desirous of never raising property tax levy. That is a very politically positive thing to say to people who only think about their taxes. But it was not prudent in the eyes of the bond rating agency. And let me tell you practically what it means. If we raise property taxes 2% a year, that's $11 million of additional revenue to run the county government. Year over year, our health care costs right now run $183 million. 2% of that is in round numbers in the vicinity of $8 to $9 million. You do the math, come up with the exact number. Howard Klein is great at this. Howard, you do the math, give us the exact number. We will pay at a 6% increase of health care costs in an additional year, $8 million more for that cost alone. This year, in this budget, we budgeted for pay-as-you-go our pension costs. First time we've done that in a number of years. $83 million in pension costs. You realize we don't establish the pension number. We get a letter from the state controller, as does every municipal government. Mike Shalero will tell you what the number is in North Castle. And that number comes, and we pay as you go, and that number, we believe, we estimate it, because we don't know until we see the letter, $83 million. If that goes up $1 million a year, which is not an unrealistic number, out of a base of $83 million, that $1 million plus $8 million from health care is $9 million. A 2% property tax increase gives you $11 million of additional revenue. How much money do you have to restock our park system? How much money then do you have to put more police on the streets to protect you in your parks when you realize you could walk through some of our parks and there's no police presence there or elsewhere? How much money does that handle us for our public health department, which is understaffed, and when a communicable disease issue breaks out, or we put sanitarians from that health department out to check the health quality of every restaurant and every swimming pool in this county? We have responsibilities as a government. And it is time for me and every other politician to stop telling you what you want to hear and tell you what you need to know, so that you can make a rational understanding of what is the correlation between taxes and services that are necessary, and not optional services. Who amongst us thinks we can choose or not choose to have somebody test the pool water in every pool to make sure it's safe to swim? Or that it's optional to determine who goes into the kitchen of every restaurant, including the food services here at the Marriott, to be sure that cleanly practices are in place. And you certainly can't assume that these things are going to be self-policed. And on through the structure of county government. But we're committed at a 2% property tax increase, $11 million, and nowhere near $11 million of additional expenditure year to year. So we have had to do some things I'd prefer not to do. We have a plan by which we would transfer the parking lots around the county center from the county government to the county LDC. I'm not going to do that if in my visits to Albany, now that I've done all the pleasant, nice to see you, George, great job you're doing in Westchester, great. Now I come back saying, okay, we need revenue. We need non-property tax revenue, steady stream of it, in order to run the services of Westchester County. That's the truth, my friends. You can look at the budget yourself. I invite you to. There's no magic trick. There's no line that says fat. We are working to diminish costs where we can. I just gave you a couple of examples of negotiations that reduces the amount of costs on contractual services. But we're going to be required to build a new family court in New Rochelle, which the Office of Court Administration is going to require us to do. That ain't coming cheap, and that's a requirement. So we have to decide exactly how are we going to fund a county government, and how are we going to accept if we do this pragmatically. And that's why, Democrat though I am, I want us as Democrats and Republicans to talk to each other with respect. I want us to try to analyze problems with respect. I want us to listen to each other. Because if we don't figure out how to do this together, if we turn into two warring factions, then we're going to be imitating what we're seeing in D.C. That's not what we want in this county. That's going to undermine everything that was built by all of our predecessors. I'm taking too long, so I got to move faster. Skipping things, Catherine Chaffee is already starting to go like this to me. We have certain core beliefs. I mentioned that we intend to stay below the property tax cap. However, at the same time, we have to maintain the services and facilities in Westchester County, and we have to maintain an open and transparent communication in that process. We held budget hearings before we put the budget together because we wanted to have input beforehand, and the board did their normal diligence of listening to people in the community and outreach and so forth. But the multi-year game plan to straighten out what's wrong with Westchester County's finances will take time. We are not going to restore our AAA bond rating overnight. We will do it if we dedicate additional revenue to restocking the fund balance and get that fund balance back up somewhere in the vicinity of $170 million. It's down to $70 million now. When we can stop doing the one-shots and mean it, and also what we can do in terms of showing the bond rating agencies that we're serious about how we go about doing our business, and we're not just trying to do it to get through the next election. Now, as we look at some of the different challenges we have ahead, our economic development efforts, Bridget Gibbons is identified as our Director of Development, Economic Development. We've had some good things happen this year. We've had in our Parks Department, the New York Liberty agree to serve our county center as their home court to join the Westchester Knicks. That's a prestigious thing, and that fills the county center on a couple of additional dates. We will be announcing an agreement with a professional arena football team that will use the county center for their home games. I'm a football fan too, so I expect to be there for those games. I still look at the ceiling and wonder if a punt is going to hit the roof or not, but they seem to think it's okay, so if they think it's okay with me. And try to find innovative ways to bring revenue into this county. Within our economic development team, we're very fortunate to have Natasha Caputo with us. We did not, I think you saw this, we did not view our entering office as an opportunity to fire everybody that preceded us. We saw plenty of talent and ability in the existing commissioners. And where we had vacancies, in as many cases as not, we promoted from within. So the argument about, the new guy comes in and the guy who, helped him out at the train station to get elected as your new county attorney, and the woman who held a cup of campaign coffee for him as the new director of tourism. We kept talented people where we had them. Natasha Caputo is one of those people, and in her efforts for tourism and working with the hotel community, she's done a terrific job, and particularly in the film area, and we hope to see more product out of that area as we go forward. When I mentioned Bridget Gibbons, Bridget has worked for major corporations. She has owned her own business, and successfully so. And when she sold it and she had some ability to figure out what comes next in her life, we were happy to have her come on board in this capacity. And in that capacity, she has focused on the whole concept of incubator operations for those in the biotech science area. Again, I'm out of my league. I don't mind saying it. And she's been able to figure out how we start the process of assisting that. We have a program. The acronym is WIN, Westchester Incubator Network, and this is a series of business entrepreneurial incubators across the county. We're planning for a springtime official launch of this, and with that, we expect to try to do just what Westchester County Association is doing with the Gigabit program, is stay on the cutting edge of what's happening in the society. The older I get, the more I realize that you have to change with the times, and understanding that incubator reality is essential, and it's pivotal to something I'm going to talk about in the next couple of minutes. And in those different areas, we're also focusing on mid-sized businesses. We have Shari Rosen Asher's joined our team, and we've made a specific outreach to the local chambers of commerce all across this county. We think that's been an untapped market for relationships, and those small businesses in those areas, and sometimes mom and pop businesses, they're struggling to bring people to downtown Armonk, downtown Mamaroneck, downtown Yonkers, all across this county, and so we have an initiative there as well. We've also made an outreach to the major corporations in the county. We've taken our executive team to meet with executives from MasterCard. We've met with Len Schleifer and his executives at Regeneron. We've gone into Danone North America, Dannon Yogurt, Evian Water, and sat and talked with various folks to understand their presence in Westchester County. What do we have to do to be good neighbors to them, hopefully to retain them as major players in the county, and to continue to do that in many other places as we can. So our economic development interests have been across the board in a number of different areas. Now, there's been a public-private partnership discussion that's gone on for a number of years. And lest people think that I'm always critical of my predecessor, let me credit Rob Astorino, and let me credit Kevin Plunkett, who's in the room, now an executive with Simone, but former Deputy County Executive. Kevin, if you're here, please stand up. Thank you. They launched an initiative that would use 60 acres of land north of where the existing Westchester Medical Center is as part of a public-private partnership with John Fareri and his organization, and it's called the North 60. And the intent that John had, he responded to an RFP a number of years ago, was a successful respondent, and they were working to put together a plan to create a biotech center there, X amount of square footage, I think potentially up to 2 million, although we'll see how we get up to 2 million, start where we start, in a multi-mixed retail, hotel use facility. The arrangements for that lease were approved by the Board of Legislators at the very end of 2017. When I came in 2018, we looked at the lease. There was a question as to whether or not there was going to be an emphasis on adding housing to that, and we went through a period of time where that was under discussion. That is no longer under discussion, so we went back to the original lease arrangements that John and his team, Neil DeLuca, the former Deputy County Executive, is a critical part of that team. And as we looked at it, we consulted with the Board of Legislators, met with representatives on both sides of the aisle in the Board of Legislators, the local legislator, Margaret Kunzio, to make sure that she and the town of Mount Pleasant were comfortable with us moving forward. And, despite what you hear about Democrats in office and all this stuff, we are prepared today in front of you to sign our lease arrangements so that the North 60 can progress with Westchester County as a partner to the Fareri organization. So I'm going to ask John Fareri to join me here for the signing of the document. Nothing's official without a photo op. There you go.
You finished, George?
Yeah, go. Now, just to show we're not kidding around, I want our County Attorney, John Nolan, to come up here, take these papers, notarize them, and file them. Come on, John. Thank you. Let me compliment Fareri and the Fareri organization for their diligent work on this. We've had numerous meetings. We looked at the contract. We wanted to be sure what we were doing was in the best interest of the county taxpayer. We are partners moving forward. There are other procedural steps that have to happen, town of Mount Pleasant, financing. There's a host of other things ahead of us, but we are now partners to see that this succeeds. And I might say, there's a risk. I learned this in my business life as well. There's a risk in everything. Things don't always turn out the way you plan. But if you don't take risk, you don't succeed. I'm sure you've learned that in your career, haven't you? If you don't take risk, you don't succeed. You take prudent risk. And in this particular case, the 60 acres that we have there, if this can be a biotech center, ultimately, that attracts people from around the area, just like the Gigabit initiative of the County Association, people will look at Westchester County, and there's a lot to like in Fairfield, and there's a lot to like in North Jersey or the North Shore of Long Island, but they'll see Westchester as a central place. We're near a medical center and Regeneron and a medical college and a host of things that could make this work. So, John, my best wishes for you as you go forward with this project. To you and Neil, good luck. Congratulations. We move forward together as partners. And I want to repeat something I said before because I think it bears repeating. Let me compliment Rob Astorino, my predecessor, and his team for advancing it to the point that it was advanced. We did not create this from ground zero. We inherited it. I talk about things that we've inherited that I wasn't so happy about, but it is also important in this society, if you're going to build lines across the aisles, you must credit people when they've done something right. This was not possible without the work of the Astorino administration as well. So please give them the recognition that they deserve. So I know I'm supposed to stop so I can answer questions. Let me just summarize by saying we've got a long way to go. I have a long way to go. I'm sincere about wanting to see this county move forward. As I said, I grew up on the south side of Mount Vernon, probably the least Westchester-y part of Westchester County. But whether you live in South Mount Vernon, Southwest Yonkers, or on a horse farm in Bedford or North Salem, we are all part of the same county. We have a common destiny, and we need to focus on what unites us, not what divides us. Thank you.